Okay, picking up where we left off, we just finished showing that how tables are related have some sort of protection to make sure that you're not entering bogus data. Now, let's just kind of stop, back up a minute, and let's talk about why we did what we did. Because if you're coming from the Microsoft Excel world, you probably would have just stitched this all together in one giant spreadsheet. Okay, let me give you a scenario. Let's say, for example, that the reason why this relationship exists is what happens if a faculty member changes their name. Okay? Without doing it the way we did it, if you had the faculty member's name out here, that's how you did it, and one of the faculty let's say they got married and they changed their last name, okay? You would have to go through and find each one of those occurrences and change it. And how likely is it you're going to be able to find them all? Is it possible you might miss one? Yeah. Doing it this way, if I go in here to, instead of having Kumquat Jones, I change this to Kumquat Smith. Okay. Now, every student who used to be pointing to Kumquat Jones is now pointing to Kumquat Smith. So, Miss Smith has changed her name. And so, if this is the reason, so I make one change because I'm only changing the name of a faculty. I don't have to stop and think, oh, I have to go over to the student table and change something. No, student just has student data. Faculty just has faculty data. I don't have to stop and think that every time I make a change to faculty, I have to go find out every place else in the database where that has made an impact. Likewise, when I'm going in and changing a student, I don't have to think about where else in the database that change might be. So the point is to make it change neutral. So I can go in and make changes to values values in those fields, and pretty much will be guaranteed that nothing is going to break. Okay? Kind of sort of makes sense? Okay. Well, now we're not exactly done yet, because what happens if I really want to be able to see things just the way I used to be able to see them in Microsoft Excel? I want to see the student name with the faculty advisor name all on it, all at once. I mean, you kind of forced me into this idea of separating these things two together, and you kind of glue them back together, but I can't see them together. All I can see is the student and faculty. I mean, that doesn't help me anything. That's just a goofy picture. So what I need now is I need to build a query that will return data in the way that I want it. In this particular case, what I want is a student information and their faculty advisor all in one row. Okay? So I want to create a scenario similar to the way you would do this if you were doing Microsoft Excel. Okay. So what I need to do is I need to be able to create a query. Now you might think that the query wizard is the way to go. Just like this little guy, I don't recommend it. I recommend the designer. Just like I recommend the designer when you're creating a table, I recommend the designer when creating queries. So I'm just going to hit this little button, and I want both of these. I'm pulling a query with both this information. Now it's automatically going to remember that there's a relationship between the two. So I'm essentially building a report. Okay. Now what do I want to show up in the report? Well, I want let's say the student ID, and I want their name. So I just double click on the first name. I want the last name. Let's say the date registered. I don't care about their age. Oh, we'll skip that one. I'm gonna skip whether or not they're a graduate student. And what I want their major. And now I want the faculty, the name of the faculty advisor. So that's a number. I don't know. I don't want numbers. I want the name of the faculty ID. So I go over here to this guy, and I click first name, last name. Well, now you might think, wait a minute, I have a first name here and a last name here, and then that gonna be a little confusing. Yeah, kind of sort of is. So maybe I ought to go in here and change the name of this, but I'll just leave it for the time being. Okay, so I have created essentially a report, and I've just picked fields, and I picked the student field from students, first name from students, last name from student, registered from students, major from students, first name from faculty and last name from faculty. Isn't that pretty cool? So I'm going to just run this query. And the way you do that, I guess we should save it first. I'll hit save, and we'll call this one Student with Advisor. That's close enough. Okay. So now I'm going to hit this little run button. That's the do it button. Hit this little guy and doink. Now it looks kind of sort of the way you'd expect. That student John Doe, registered, major, and then faculty. Now see what it did? Because there were duplicates, there's one called first name, there's one called first name over here, one called last name. It wasn't going to leave you in a lurch. What it basically did is it did a prefix for you and told you that's a student last name and this is the faculty last name or first name. Kind of cool. Alright, now the weird part about these queries is the queries don't actually exist. They don't actually take up any room. This takes up room in the database. This takes up room in the database. This guy is just he's just a set of instructions. So every time you click on this, it builds this list from scratch. This, it just pulls it up from memory because it's already got that. This, it pulls it up from memory because it's already got that. When you click on this, it says, I don't know, let me go find the data, combine them together, figure out what fields you wanted, because remember, I didn't want all the fields. I just went through and picked a handful of fields that I wanted. I ended up with, it looks like a table. I mean, practically the only way you can tell it was not a table is looking at this little symbol right here. So right here, this little guy means that's an honest-to-God table. This means that it's a query. And if you were not paying attention, it is distinctly possible that you would just instantly look at this and say, aha, that's a table. But it's not. It's actually a query. Okay, now there's an entire chapter in the optional book talking about how to create super duper queries, like give me all students whose age is greater than 42. Give me everyone who's got an electrical engineering degree as their major, and all these kind of things. And we're not going to do that in this course. So this course is designed to show you the basics. So let's just go through the basics one more time. You should be able to know how to create a table with fields. Give a field a name. Give it a data type. Optionally, give it a size. You should be able to create multiple fields into a record. You should be able to know how to pick one of those guys and make them a primary key. There are techniques where the machine can automatically generate a primary key for you, but again, that's for another day. So that's a skill you need to know how to do. Then you need to know how to go in and add data to the tables. It's not that difficult. You just double click on the thing and use the tab key and just type. Noticing, of course, that you can't go in and lasso cells like you could in Excel. So you're talking about just typing in the cells and moving from one row to another. Okay, cool. So you should be able to know how to stitch tables together. There's several parts to this. One is you have to figure out the relationship in your head. You have to figure out what is a 1 and what is a many. Is it a one-to-one relationship? Is it a one-to-many relationship? And then once you figured that out, one of the tables has to have an added field. So once you figure out which one it is, then you put that field in the many part. You put the field in the many and point it back to the 1. Now, we did that from the little designer here. So this is the mini, there's the mini side, and we drag and drop. So I added a faculty ID over here on students and then drug the two together. Okay, and I created an honest-to-God formal relationship. I also turned on a feature called referential integrity, which means make sure I don't make any mistakes. Okay, so building tables, primary keys, foreign keys. I had to add a foreign key. I had to figure out what table it goes to. Then I went in and said, okay, I want to formalize this with a relationship. I turned on referential integrity. And then we said, okay, I want to get it back to the way it was, like in an Excel spreadsheet. So I created a query. And the query allowed me to pick and choose any one of the fields that I wanted. I picked this field out of this table, this field out of that table, this field out of that table. And then I run the query, and it spits it out looking like a table, but it's not really a table. Okay, that's not bad for an introduction to Microsoft Access. Now, Microsoft Access is probably this big, and we've covered this much of it. I mean, less than a third of what you need to know to be proficient in Microsoft Access. So this is very much an introductory course on Microsoft Access. We're not going to go any further than this, but it's a good place to start. When I'm interviewing people and ask them about their office automation skills, the people who say, well, yeah, I know how to do Microsoft Access, boom, they go up in my mind really quick. I mean, they get extra 5 points, so to speak, because this is a defining skill. If you had 100 people in the room and you were to say, how many people, office workers, how many people know how to run Microsoft Access? Probably out of 100, I'm saying 10 would raise their hand. Okay? So this is a defining feature, a defining skill set. And if I'm trying to interview you and you're telling me that you're that 1 out of 10, woohoo, yeah, that makes an impression upon me. Okay, this is the end. I'll see you guys again in some future chapter.